Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How y'all doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing flashback favorites, which is a video that I do randomly here on my channel going through some of the favorites that I have had in the past that are in videos from back when I did favorite videos. I no longer do them because I just feel like there are so many products that I'm trying and I'm not really spending a lot of time digging into one specific product. That said, the favorites that we're going to go through today are going to be back from 2017 and honestly from a time and place that I didn't really have any business picking favorites because I was brand new in the beauty scene and didn't really know what I was doing. So we'll be going through some August, September, October, and November of 2017 favorites with you today. I promise it won't be 500 years long. But I do have some thoughts on some of these that I put into my favorites videos of the past. And I hope that sounds like something you're interested in and you'll want to stick around, keep on watching, and potentially subscribe before you go. With that said, for those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high-end colorful beauty. I also am a field leader for Ulta Beauty, so I get a lot of education in my position, like to really bring you that education here. But ultimately, this is just about me talking about makeup out here because I like to talk about makeup, and I'm assuming if you're here you probably also do as well. So I hope that you find that this channel brings solace to your soul in the way that it brings solace to mine, and you'll want to subscribe before you check out of here. So with that said, let's roll into this video where we're going to go over some of my favorites from 2017. Okay, most of these, I should say a good portion of these, I do not have in my collection anymore. There are some that I still have in my collection. I'm going to scooch over so that I can put pictures in here of the products that I don't have anymore. We're going to start with August 2017. This was the month that I started my YouTube channel. So I think I maybe did favorites at the end of every single month for the month previous. And I have several items in here that I don't have anymore, but I also have several that I do. So let's start with the stuff that I still have. I still have these. These are the Viseart Sultry Muse and Dark Matte eyeshadow palettes. These are $88 eyeshadow palettes. And I got these at the time on a buy two get two sale from Muse Beauty. And I still feel the same about this one. I think that this Dark Mattes palette is a really great palette for dark mattes. I think that it is a palette that I pull for often for colors that I don't typically have in my collection as it pertains to mattes, because you can get some really nice mattes, but not really deep mattes. And at the time, that was the only palette that really had really dark mattes in it, and I love a really dark matte in my eye looks. This one I don't feel the same way about. The Viseart, I think I've talked about this a couple times now recently specifically, but Viseart shimmers are not my favorite shimmer formula. I think that there's a lot to be desired from this formula. I think that they're more shiny than they are sparkly, and I like a more impactful like sparkle to my eyelid more than I do a shininess to my eyelid. I just feel like these are satins more than they are shimmers and could easily go into the crease of any eye look and look perfectly fine. So the Dark Mattes, it is a favorite palette for me in my collection still. I also put this in there, the Tarte Amazonian Clay 12-Hour Blush Bazaar. It has 8 blushes and 2 highlighters in it that I still feel are wonderful blushes and highlighters. I do think that the highlighters are a little more lit from within than they were at the time that I tried this palette for the first time, but I do think the blushes are just, I mean, super pigmented, and they last forever on the skin, which is something that I think that Tarte did well, does well. Their Amazonian Clay blushes were probably the best blush formula from a powder perspective on the market for a very long time. The only thing left from that time frame that I do have in my collection still is the ABH Modern Renaissance eyeshadow palette. This is a palette that I pulled in way back then, purchased way back then, because it was the palette to have at that point in time. And if you didn't have it, who were you anyway? I bought it specifically to recreate an eye look that Manny MUA had done on his YouTube channel with this palette, and I loved Manny MUA at that moment in time. I still like Manny MUA a lot, but I don't watch him nearly as much as I did when I purchased this palette and wanted to use it to recreate an eye look he did. Is it still a favorite for me? Probably not, honestly, but it's also not a favorite, if that makes any sense. It is a good, reliable eyeshadow palette, and even now, being as old as it is, it still performs quite well. And y'all, I have used the poop out of this palette, but it doesn't really look that way. And I think the ABH eyeshadows were just eyeshadows that were built to withstand the test of time. I think also because they're so like powdery and Fallout Central, to be honest, that they do continue to hold a lot of that pigmentation that was in the shadows initially, because they're not as firmly packed. Honestly, I don't know if there's any science behind that. I doubt it. But that one still works. It still works really good, so I'll still keep it around. Then there were several products that I no longer have in my collection still in that list. The first one being the Maybelline Eye Studio Brow Define and Fill. So this was an eye pencil on one side and like a puff with powder that if you like pushed on it, the powder would come out the puff end, kind of like the Charlotte Tilbury wands, right? Had the puff on the end. I didn't really mess with my brows a whole hell of a lot back then, so this would of course be a product that I thought was fantastic for my brows, because you could fill your brows all in one fell swoop with that powder, and it was no big deal. I do think that this one was quite a bit warm, if I remember correctly. I really had no business saying that this was a great brow pencil, because it was my first brow pencil, so there's that. I also had the Bare Minerals Well Rested Eye Primer on here. I don't feel like it did anything to hold my eyeshadows on my eye, but I also feel like in today's age, right, with all of the like textured eyeshadows that we get, like it would not hold up to the eyeshadows of today. It definitely held up to the eyeshadows of the past. I don't remember it doing anything to hold the other eyeshadows onto my face in the way that most eyeshadow primers do today. I also have on here the L'Oreal Lash Paradise. If I remember correctly, this was a dupe for the Too Faced Better Than Sex mascara, and I hate the Too Faced Better Than Sex mascara, so I have no idea why that is on here. That one, if I remember correctly, flaked just as much as the Better Than Sex does, so I wouldn't say that that's even a good in a pinch kind of mascara for me these days. I also had the Bare Minerals Complexion Rescue, which I firmly feel is one of the best skin tints in the makeup space. It is a skin tint though that I think could sway somebody one way or another towards skin tints, because it has a little bit of a weird like texture to it, but if you massage it into your face much like you do a lotion, it just goes onto your face and looks just perfection. It really does perfect your complexion, and it really has some really great ingredients in it that do a good job of like healing your skin if you have like inflamed skin. So I do think that it is a really great product, and it was in my collection still to this day until a couple months ago when I think I decluttered it in my foundation declutters because the one I had was bad. I would repurchase it, but I'm not going to right now because I still have a ton of foundations in my collection that I need to filter through before I bring another one of these in, but it is one that I would even say I like it better than the like Fenty Ease Drops that I have in my collection these days. I also had the Physicians Formula Butter Bronzer on here, and listen, this was probably one of the best bronzers that I've ever had in my collection, and it took me 3 years to pan this, like to completion. It was in my project pan for 3 years. It was a beautiful bronzer. It blended out so perfectly. It smelled divine. The only thing it doesn't have going for it is its component. That packaging is the worst packaging. It breaks. Every Physicians Formula packaging product, powdered packaged product, the packaging breaks. It's the worst. So I would probably repurchase the butter bronzer. I've thought about it several times. Now they have different shades of the butter bronzer, whereas when I purchased mine, they didn't. It was the only one. And it was really great, and it was all the rage on the YouTube space. I remember having to send my friend Diana one because she lives in Europe and she couldn't get it over there. In September, I have a few items that are on my list from September that are items that I still have in my collection. Not the items, but items that I repurchased after utilizing them in entirety from this list. The first one is the Schwarzkopf Got to Be Glued Blasting Freeze Spray. So this is the hairspray that I used to use every single day in my hair. And back then I had really short, like a asymmetrical, like pixie cut, long in the front, really short party in the back. And I used to like run my hand through it and then spray it with this stuff and run my hand through it again, and where it landed it stayed, because this is glue for your hair. I mean, it looks like a foghorn up at the top. It was my favorite hairspray at the time because it really did its due diligence to keep my party hair looking like party hair, and I really liked it. And it kept my hair in place even while I worked at Starbucks, where it was super hot and muggy and like you sweat a lot while you're working at Starbucks. Another thing that I have on there is the Mario Badescu facial spray. This one is in cucumber and green tea, which is I think the same one that I had in that same video. This one is not the one from 2017. This I think I purchased again in 2019, I do believe, and then quit purchasing it in 2020 because I started growing my hair out. So that one is left from 2020. This I got in gratis, I think last year or the year before at FLC. So this isn't the same bottle, obviously, but I do have it in my collection. These are really good facial sprays for like cooling your face down or making it so that your face looks a little less like the Sahara Desert. I need this more over in Eastern Washington than I do here in Western Washington. It's just not as hot here, so I don't find myself pulling for a facial spray ever, but I used to keep them in the car, and driving down the road I would spray it in my face so that I could cool down my face, but also make it so that my makeup did not get crusty. It's really good for that. I also had the Lorac Pro palette, which is this guy here. This is a really great, like, just truly staple palette. It's just a very cool tone palette. Listen, Lorac has a really fundamental formulation that is really great, honestly. Probably the best white and black that I have in my collection. Their shimmers are much like Viseart shimmers in that they're more shiny than they are sparkly, so they're not necessarily my favorite, but they do in a pinch, number one, and they work well in the crease too, because they don't crease, because they're less sparkly, not so much textured. Really great palette. I've had several of these Lorac Pro palettes in my collection. This is the only one that still exists, and I feel like, again, this is a palette that still works very, very well, even though this palette is many, many years old. I also have this Becca Shimmering Skin Perfector, and this one is in the shade Opal. I did find this one at TJ Maxx, and the reason why I was even drawn to these specifically is because there was a creator here on the YouTube space named Liv who did so many videos about these flying saucer highlighters, and I think she really did her due diligence to draw attention to Becca highlighters in and of themselves. This one is a really beautiful kind of like pinky champagne color that I still feel is like a beautiful color on my skin. I also feel like these blend out so super well and become one with the skin and don't really lay on top of the skin. So these are still one of my very favorite formulations. They don't look so powdery and go on to your skin and just kind of sit on top, right? They go on and they become one. Also, like lit from within kind of highlighters versus a beaming highlighter, but you can make them beaming if you really want to by just wetting them and putting them on that way. I think that they're probably one of the best formulas for highlighters because they are one with your skin. They never have looked powdery. Even as old as that one is, I don't feel like it looks powdery on my face. So then I had that are products that I no longer have in my collection. So I have a couple moisturizers. I have the e.l.f. Illuminating Moisturizer, which if I remember correctly was holographic almost, not glittery, but sparkly to some extent. Like it was very illuminating without having glitter in it, and I really appreciated that, and I loved the pump on it. It was a really nice moisturizer, but I used it much like I would use a primer. I also had the Origins Perfect World SPF moisturizer, and I don't remember a whole lot about this moisturizer, if I'm honest. It could have been good, it could have not been good. I haven't tried it since then, so I mean, it was a favorite for me back in the day, but that was also roughly my first adventures in skincare, let's just be honest. I also had the O'Keeffe's Working Hands on here, and this is quite possibly the best hand cream made. I was working at Starbucks at the time as a general manager for Starbucks, and our hands were constantly in sanitizer water, soapy water. We were always washing our hands, and my hands used to like crack and bleed, which is a problem in and of themselves. Or I was having to wear gloves all the time, and I'm allergic to latex, so that was also a problem in and of itself. I could get the other gloves, but rarely. I did buy this O'Keeffe's Working Hands, and it did so much for healing my hands and keeping them also protected from the elements and continuing to just crack and bleed and get worse and worse. So love that stuff, would purchase that again. And they also have a heel cream that is fantastic as well. And then I had the MAC eyebrow pencil in Lingering. I remember I got this in a BoxyCharm and I loved this pencil. It was really the first eyebrow pencil that I had that was so thin that you could draw in the like hair-like strokes at the front. And I remember it was also really a deep, deep brown color. And I fell in love with dark brows at that point in time in my life. So, and I've kept them pretty dark. They're in between the magical hands of an arch expert at our stores. So, but I typically keep them pretty dark, and that one, I remember loving that pencil. I remember going back to an Ulta Beauty trying to find that MAC pencil and couldn't find one, but I loved that MAC pencil. I would probably repurchase it today. We also had the Buxom Plump Liner in White Russian and a Buxom Full On Lip Cream in Dolly. And the full on like lip creams, lip glosses, lip whatevers, I still like a lot. Probably one of my favorite lip gloss formulas are those Buxom lip glosses. The plump liners I remember being a really great at the time lip liner that I felt was amazing, and now I just feel like it was built more to be like a lip crayon, in that they were, you know, kind of chubby and they didn't really have the capacity to create a really nice lip line. So why they were called lip liners, I will never know. I used to fill my lips in with them just like I would use a lipstick. I still do that even with my thinner pencils, but these days I have decluttered all of them out of my collection except for the two that I use through Project Panning. Because they're too creamy. They just move, right, all over the place, and I have found better lip liners that I like a lot more. And then the last thing on this list is the Too Faced Peach Perfect Foundation, and that shit had a stronghold on me for a long time, which is funny because it's a matte foundation, considered comfort matte, which I would say it reminds me a lot of the IT Cosmetics Nude Glow, the CC Plus whatever foundation in Nude Glow, because that is what I'm wearing today. It is considered full coverage, but it is so lightweight that it doesn't bother me at all. The only difference between those two things is that the one from Too Faced was matte. It looked matte. There was no illumination to it, whereas the Nude Glow I feel like is a little bit more glowy on my skin, feels a little bit like it brings my skin to life versus like mattifies it. I would say that Too Faced Peach Perfect foundation, I probably purchased 6 of them while they were out for Too Faced, and I really liked them at the time. I really liked them a lot. So smelled like peach rings. Oh my gosh, it was so good. And I felt like it looked good on my skin too, but then I had super dry skin. I wasn't moisturizing a whole hell of a lot because I remember it breaking up around like my nose and my chin area, and me starting to feel like it maybe wasn't the best. But if I remember clear back then, it had been doing that the whole time, and I still purchased it over and over and over again. So I'm just not a matte person anymore. I probably wouldn't pick it up today just knowing that it is a matte foundation, but it was my favorite for a very, very long time. And I think there was, honestly, it looked beautiful on the skin until it really set down. So there's that. In October, I only have one product still in my collection from my October favorites, and that is the Kat Von D Saint and Sinner palette. This was a palette that there was no way that this palette was going to come out and I wasn't going to own it, because I had missed the Metal Matte palette, I think because I just wasn't in the space quite yet. And there was another one that was like a circle. I can't remember what it was called, but I had a real deep affinity for Kat Von D. Like, I thought that her tattoo work was amazing. I have tattoos. Like, I thought that she was an amazing person at that point in time. So I needed to have this palette, and I remember saving for it because it was the most expensive palette that I had ever thought about purchasing at that point in time. And I think it was like $69 or $62, something like that. This was the greatest palette because it had that, you know, deep dark like Halloween-y side, but then it also had like the ethereal side to it, so you could get just about anything out of this palette that you really wanted to accomplish with an eye look. And I simply had to have it. It is beautiful. It looks like, you know, a cathedral window, and I had to have it. So I purchased it, and it's still a beautiful palette. I don't think that the eyeshadows are the best eyeshadows. Let's just start there. I do think that they can be impactful, and I do think that I created some really great eyeshadow looks at that time for me with this palette. It isn't a favorite in my collection. It isn't even one that I think about very often, but it is a palette that I will probably hold on to. Even when I retire it or declutter it out of my collection, it will go into my nostalgia box, because it is a palette that I remember just the struggle of whether I was going to spend my 60-something on that palette or something else, because it was a point in time where I was really having to save in order to purchase certain things, and felt some kind of way about how I was spending my money. And shortly after that, Kat Von D came out as a really horrible person. Little did we know. Then on that list, I also had several products that I no longer have. One being a Japanese brush cleaner that, much like the e.l.f. brush cleaner, did I talk about that in the previous one? I don't think I did. In September, I had the e.l.f. Daily Brush Cleaner in here, and that was trash. That was like water. It doesn't clean nothing. It cleaned absolutely nothing. I wouldn't buy e.l.f. brush cleaner today if you paid me to. The Japanese one was like maybe one step up from that, but not much better. It was really, really pretty awful. To be honest, I don't even know if you can purchase it anymore. That e.l.f. brush cleaner is still for sale. I clean my brushes after every single use. I can't imagine using... I bought it because of that fact, and it's like $3. I couldn't imagine having to use that on my brushes. It doesn't clean anything. Like, you might as well just be continuing to put old makeup on your face if you're using that. Then I have a Janta Blue lip liner on here, which I can't say I remember much about the Janta Blue lip liners. If I do remember anything, it's that I really thought that they reminded me a lot of, later, I really thought they reminded me a lot of the NYX lip liners, and that they are, you know, pretty waxy and therefore last, you know, quite a long time. They aren't one that I could wear all throughout my lip, which is what I was doing back then and what I still do today, to be honest. They're just not super creamy. They're a little bit more waxy than they are creamy. So I do have my favorites, Natasha Denona. I really like the Makeup Forever ones now. I really, really like Charlotte Tilbury's are probably my favorites. And if I'm going to go cheap, it's going to be a ColourPop one. So I probably wouldn't repurchase that. I also had the Urban Decay Afterglow Highlight in Sin. This was a highlight that was sent to me from Urban Decay just as a birthday gift or something like that. I remember this being really beautiful, but I also remember it looking very, very powdery on the skin. Definitely a more subtle shine to it than like the Becca ones, but it was very, very powdery. I also have the Carity Mattes and Frost palettes on here. I don't even know if Carity is still in business, if I'm honest with you. I remember they gave everybody who purchased from them like a discount code that they could give to their friends. I think it's down in my description box still, or was for a very long time, just to get $5 off of their palettes or something like that. Not an affiliated code or anything like that, but I remember they were good. They weren't fantastic. They were impactful at the time, and they were super cheap. I think it was $21 for 21 shades. Reminds me a lot of like ColourPop or Coastal Scents. I wouldn't think twice about these palettes today. They would not be anything that I even side-eyed. The Frost ones, super creasy, really not super impactful. Again, shiny, not sparkly. Definitely not an innovative formula. And then the last thing in my October list is the It Cosmetics Brow Power. And if you all know, you know, like if you've been around a while, you know, I think that this is probably the worst brow pencil on the planet. Like I hate this brow pencil. And the thing about it is that every single one of these that I've had, whether I got it in gift with purchase, whether I purchased it myself, whether I got it in BoxyCharm, every single one of them broke inside the component. They were too creamy and too fat, really, too chubby to be a brow pencil. Like an eyeliner, sure. A brow pencil, I just don't think that they're it. They didn't last. They smeared all over the place. They remind me a lot of the e.l.f. ones, to be honest, and the e.l.f. ones are also not my favorite. The last month that we're going to go into for flashback favorites, because I think I did December's at some point, but is the November 2017, and I only have 2 products still left in my collection from November 2017. One is the Winky Lux Kitten palette. This is a palette that I received in BoxyCharm. And it's a palette I actually have 2 pans in. So, you know, it's a decent palette, and it was a favorite for me at one point in time. And I actually got those pans pulling it into like a deck of panning or something like that. There are these 2 shades here that I absolutely cannot stand. This gold is horrible. I think because it's a gold and I don't like gold, and the blue is actually just not a great blue. It's a really dirty, dingy blue, like almost a denim, like a dirty denim shade. But the rest of them are really beautiful. This one is such a beautiful like duochrome color, and this pink is actually really pretty as well, and like a highlight, brow highlight, or like inner corner even. And this palette has gone with me on trips several times because I just think that it is a perfect like basics palette with kind of like a kick and a pop. So it is a beautiful palette. Do I think that the palette is still a favorite for me? No, but I do think that it is a really great, just consistent formula that I enjoy. I don't have any. I did purchase that one, made me want to try more from Winky Lux, so I did purchase a couple other palettes from them, and I have since decluttered both of those palettes. So, I mean, not the best formula for sure overall, but that palette specifically wowed me. And then the other one is the Jaclyn Hill palette, and this one was the original palette that Jaclyn Hill did with Morphe. And I do think that this is not a favorite, obviously, these days. It's very redundant in some of the shades that are in this palette, but I do think that from a Morphe perspective, this is one of the better palettes that Morphe has produced as far as the formulation goes. Now, after this one was produced, they did reproduce it multiple times and then change the formula, and now the formula is no longer vegan for the Jaclyn Hill palette, but I do love this palette for the formulation from a Morphe perspective. The other things that I had on this list were the ABH Brow Wiz, which is a product that I absolutely cannot stand these days. The Brow Wiz pulls very, very warm for me. Every single shade of the Brow Wiz pulls very, very warm for me. And I like my brows to be a little bit more cool toned and a lot more dark than what the ABH Brow Wiz goes to. I also have the Laura Geller Spackle Primer on here, and that was my holy grail primer for a very long time. And there's like 8 different primers that are in her Spackle line that are fantastic. I was just talking to a guest the other day about these primers because you can still get them. You just can't get them like in store or whatnot, but I would repurchase these primers. They're really great primers. Her green one, specifically the color correcting and cooling one, was my holy grail, and I loved it so much. They're better than the Smashbox primers that everybody else seems to have, you know, an affinity for. I also had the Hard Candy Corrector palette on here. I don't really do any correcting, so I'm not sure. And I do think that the LA Girl color correctors are better than that Hard Candy ever was. And then from a non-makeup perspective, I have the Tarte Maracuja oil on here and the Philosophy Miracle Worker Night Cream on here. The Philosophy Miracle Worker Night Cream is a moisturizer that I would never purchase again. Just the perfume in it really irritated my skin. I don't know what I was thinking here, but that Tarte Maracuja oil I actually quite liked. And I remember it came in a really cool bottle with a really cool like pipette, like dropper, and I would probably repurchase that. I've got a lot of facial oils right now though, so I don't need another one, but I do like that Maracuja oil for sure. And with that said, that is it. That is all. That is my flashback favorites, going through all the favorites that I had from August of 2017 to November of 2017. A few of the products are still in my collection, and you know, a few of them I have received or repurchased because they were and continued to be for quite some time favorites in my collection. But I wouldn't say any of these are favorites anymore. I would repurchase the Butter Bronzer. I would probably also repurchase the Complexion Rescue. I would repurchase the O'Keeffe's Working Hands. I know I would repurchase a Buxom Full-On Lip Cream. And I would probably repurchase the Laura Geller Spackle Primers. So of all of those products, like 5 of them would be on my list of things that I would repurchase today. Sadly. But it's always fun to walk through like old favorites just to figure out like what you were thinking at the time and see how we've changed, right? Our thought processes have changed. But with that said, what are some of your favorites that you had in the past that you either A, wouldn't touch today, or that you're still repurchasing over and over and over again today? I would be interested to hear down in the comment section. So don't forget to hit me up down there. I always appreciate our conversation. With that said, I just thank you guys so very much for joining me today. I hope that you and yours are well. I hope that you are all healthy and safe and getting along as best that you can. I hope that you are all loving each other, being kind humans, and just living your best life. And until next time, bye friends.